Hey everybody, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me this morning. Today we're diving into the latest buy-sell trends, outlook and impact of tariffs on the retail automotive space. Joining us now is Ryan Kerrigan. You've seen him here before on CBT News. He's the managing director at Kerrigan Advisors. Welcome into the show, Ryan. It's always great catching up with you.
Thanks, Jim. Good to see you.
So tell us, how's the buy-sell activity shaking out in 2025, given the first quarter slow start of the year in Q1?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, notwithstanding the headlines and all the things that we're talking about in terms of uncertainties and tariff, buy sells are strong. 213 buy sells in the
Wow.
first half of 2025. So we are tracking ahead of 2024. So we continue in this rarefied air, and buy sells are getting done.
Yeah, that's great. Well, on record, what's been the busiest in the past 10 years or so in terms of Q1? How like if you
Um,
put it
so
in?
Yeah, so I think more in terms of the annualized numbers, and
Mhm.
so we have been in excess of 400 buy sells annually now for the last couple of years, and those are records. So we continue to be at this record pace of something well north of 400 buy sells. We're estimating like 450 buy sells in 2025.
Wow, wow. So more tuck-ins, less platform deals, but multi-store deals are still getting done. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's exactly right. To kind of hit on your first point, the we are seeing a lot more sort of when I say small, I'm talking about rooftops, not necessarily dollars,
Okay.
but the one, two, three rooftop type transactions, I
Hmm.
think, are sort of the flavor of the day. There are people were growing quickly, lots of deals got done,
Hmm.
lots of large groups are digesting significant transactions, so they're not out of the game, but I'd say a little bit more focus on being strategic, doing tuck-ins, things of that nature.
Hmm.
That said, of course, platform deals are getting done. We just announced, for example, a couple of weeks ago, the largest Jaguar Land Rover deal that's ever been done.
Wow.
U.S. Auto Trust sold four very sizable JLR stores. Sonic Automotive, the acquirer, is now the largest retailer of JLR in North America.
Wow.
So big announcement for
Yeah.
them. So they are happening. Of course, we finally just got notification that the Herb Chambers deal is final. I think
Yeah.
that came out perhaps yesterday.
Yeah.
So very substantial. It's been in the works for quite some time. So
Sure.
there are larger transactions that are getting done. We'll have a couple of more in 2025 to announce. But I would say that the flavor of the day has shifted to being a little more strategic and a little more focused versus the large things. Clearly, interest rates play into that,
Yeah.
and so interest rates continue to be elevated as they have been the last couple of years.
Sure.
If we were to see those come down in the next year or two, that could facilitate the ability to start financing bigger and bigger deals.
Okay. And it looks like there might be some good news coming out of the Oval Office on that very topic, right? I mean, yesterday, President Trump came out and said, "Oh, I don't know if this guy's going to make it," and the Fed chair is might be out. And then he followed up by saying, you probably heard him, that he believes that interest rates should be 3 percentage points
Mm,
lower,
mm,
which is
yeah, yeah.
wow.
Well, I think there's still a very strong possibility of interest rate cuts in 2025,
Yeah,
and there's no question there's going to be someone new in that seat
yeah,
in early 2026, and we'll see how they play with the administration's pressure
sure.
on them. But yeah, I think there's a sense that interest rates are probably trending down in the not too distant future.
Sure, sure. Speaking of publics, and obviously you follow the stocks. If the stocks
Mhm.
are strong, they're typically out there buying. If the stocks aren't the case, then not so much. So what are the stocks looking like with the publics right now?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a ride. So in February, the Kerrigan Index reached an all-time high, and so it was they were just absolutely booming. The stocks were
Yeah,
incredibly robust. Post Liberation Day, they plummeted. They were down like almost 30%, 28%
yeah,
within inside of 60 days. So they went from this euphoric high to losing, about 30% of value inside a very short period of time. They have recovered moderately. They've recovered about 8% off of that bottom. So they're
okay.
still trying to find their way in this new Trump tariff world.
Hmm.
But they're active. I mean, they still are willing to reach and get some things done. The other thing is, given the volatility of the stock price that I just mentioned, for example, where they're coming out of 2024, they zip up in early 2025, they then plummet. These deals take a lot longer than that, and so the publics will end up committing to transactions
Hmm.
that make a ton of sense at the time that they sign the deal, but by the time they get through diligence, OEM approvals, et cetera, it could be 6 to 9 months later.
Right.
And as we can see in the last 6 months, every month is a different situation. So sometimes we think about their willingness to lean in to do acquisitions as a trailing indicator of where their stock. Let me restate that. When the deals get announced,
Hmm.
it's a trailing indicator of kind of where they were when they were inking the deal
Okay.
quietly.
Okay.
So the publics are solid. That we're certainly off of those all-time highs that we saw earlier this year, and they are willing to do selective deals. But kind of a mixed bag. That said, with them being up 8% off that low, Sonic, Penske, and AutoNation all hit all-time highs
Hmm.
this month. So a
Hmm.
little bit of a divergence within the stocks as well.
Sure, sure. And they've all had all-time highs because the stores are selling cars, new car sales, used car sales, fixed operations. If they've got collision centers, those are doing well.
Yeah.
So tariffs have yet to really shock the market and even the buy-sell market, more importantly, this year. How are they
Yeah.
impacting car sales overall? Because it seems the dealers that I'm talking to are saying, well, things are going good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. We're going to see here in the next quarter how this is all impacting. So what we saw on the retail side, that is the consumer facing, is that tariffs were a very short-term positive in the sense that people were accelerating the purchase of cars. So we zipped up to 17 million SAR, a level we've not seen in a decade.
Right.
So in the short term, it has bolstered the industry, but that's because people are fearing substantial increases in price
Hmm.
down the line.
Yeah.
So I think there's two variables. One, how quickly do these trade deals get signed, and then what are the known tariffs at that point?
Right.
And then how does that then impact how consumers are reacting? But yeah, I mean, it's been Q2 was a very strong quarter for overall, just given the fact that people were trying to front run the tariffs. How it's going to play out with the consumer, unclear. I will say that CDK put out a report recently, and it talked about the consumer. I would argue kind of breaking, if you will, and so it was a real plummet in satisfaction by consumers. Prior reports had talked about aggravation with inventory levels, so just
Hmm.
not being able to find the car that I want. And this was sort of across the board. They don't have the inventory. The prices are too high. They're not giving enough on my trade. The
Right.
financing options are very unacceptable. So a real degradation in sort of customer sentiment
Hmm.
about automotive purchases. And
Hmm.
so I think that is sort of the beginning of the new reality, the limited inventory, the
Okay.
much higher prices that are starting to filter in, and the consumers are starting to react.
Right, right. Every dealer I talk to, every OEM executive, we always touch on affordability. Obviously, it's one of the things that I think keeps a lot of automotive executives awake at night. There doesn't seem to be much, room in a consumer's pocketbook, for them to absorb a tariff.
Yeah.
So not without, changing something else. Talk to us about that because affordability has been really at the forefront of everybody's mind that is in the car business. And what are we going to do with this, especially as the
Yeah.
tariffs,
It continues to be a challenge, and I think the consumers are kind of at the point where there's not a lot more room without starting to sort of take on unusual levels of debt.
Yeah.
There was the statistic about the number of weeks pay required to buy a new car just peaked recently at 37 weeks, for example. So this does continue to be an issue.
Yeah.
What we've seen thus far in the first, 90 days of this kind of post-liberation moment era of the industry is that the OEMs have largely, I mean, look, for example, the Japanese. The Japanese have brought down landed prices by almost 20%. So they are by and large just eating that 25% tariff currently on Japan
Yeah.
to kind of address this. On the flip side, you saw some of the luxury manufacturers and the ultra luxury manufacturers out of Europe saying, you know what, we got to pass it on. It is what it is. And sales have really struggled, even for that very affluent customer set that people
Right.
assume are a little bit less sort of impacted by tariffs. And so, thus far, we're seeing the OEMs really bear the brunt of it,
Right.
and less so the consumer. I mean, to that point, we just saw notes. GM said that tariffs had impacted Q2 by 1.1 billion. Ford is anticipating a $1.5 to $2 billion less in profitability because of tariffs.
Hmm.
Stellantis just posted a $2.7 billion loss in the first 6 months of the year.
Wow.
So the OEMs are bearing the brunt of this right now as everyone's trying to sort out what's going
Yeah,
on.
for sure, for sure. Always top of mind, obviously, are EVs today. A story we know that continues to evolve. How are EV sales and the market share, rates doing as of Q2 in 2025? The outlook in the U.S. for EVs is not positive. CARB mandates have been rolled back, and leasing loophole that previously boasted EV sales in the U.S. has been eliminated. So there's a lot going on in that EV situation
Yeah.
right now. I think it's got some people nervous as we take those benefits away. Certainly in the next 60 days until September 30th, we're
Yep.
probably going to clean the shelves out of EVs.
Yeah.
I'm already talking to dealers that are saying, oh no, we've already seen a major increase in inquiries about EVs, demo drives, and obviously sales. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, hey, this continues to be a challenge. You and I can chuckle and say we told you so from a couple of years ago. You and I were both
Yep.
very skeptical that the industry and the country
Oh
and the
yeah.
consumer was going to shift wholesale and quickly to EV. And so, EVs, as you recall, got up to about an 8-9% market share for a
Right.
moment in time. Has since trended back. It's closer to 6%. I think 6.3% was the last data point that I saw. So just not a successful launch. It's not to say that they're going away. It's just to say that very de minimis sort of impact on the overall market here to date.
Yeah.
Ford is still saying, for example, its EV division is losing $5 billion a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
even with incurring those kinds of losses and subsidizing these products, they just are not finding much in the way of fertile ground here in the United States.
Right.
The flip side of that, of course, is that hybrids continue to perform. And so hybrids between plug-in
Yeah.
and the
That's right.
non-plug-in options are trending to about 10% of market. Toyota, for example, just put out a note celebrating its 1 millionth hybrid built in Indiana.
Hmm.
So that continues to function, that continues to work, and it seems to make sense. The EV market here in the U.S. Very much languishing. Now, interestingly, we are out of step with the globe. The globe's about 20% EV, just shy of
Yeah.
20% EV of global auto sales. And so, and that continues to grow. Now, a lot of those are much less expensive vehicles going into different markets, certainly not without being laden with all of the American requirements, for example, around safety and whatnot.
Sure.
But the globe continues to see the EV phenomenon progress. In the U.S., much less so.
That's right. And as Michael Dunn has reminded us when we were on with him, that we are on an island because China is shipping those inexpensive EVs all over the world,
Yep.
except for North America, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I was speaking with a very senior auto executive in Europe in recent days. He anticipates that even with the EU trying to contain it and curtail it, he believes that the Chinese will have 30 to 40% market share in Europe in relatively short
Wow.
order,
That's huge.
barring some really big trade barriers
Wow.
being put up.
Big.
Uh, as you and I've discussed, I mean, the export machine out of China is absolutely booming.
Yeah.
6 million exports last year, trending to I'm sure a larger number in 2025.
Hmm.
So yeah, that phenomenon is playing out in a big way. We're just not seeing it in the North American market.
No, no,
And
not
let me
yet.
restate that.
Not yet,
We're not
anyway.
seeing it in the American market. Lots and lots of Chinese imports into Mexico. So we're going to
Yes,
start
that's
seeing
right.
it on the southern
That's
border.
exact. Yes, yeah, no question. So have there been any significant changes in the EV product offerings by OEMs?
Well, interestingly, even with market share languishing and in some cases falling, the number of EV entrants keeps increasing. So we look at the models, the range of models being offered, it continues to increase. Ford, on that note, just said, for example, that all Ford dealers are going to have access to their full EV lineup, which is very different if we go back a couple of years of how they were doing the tiering, for example. And in order to even have access to EVs, you need to do certain types of investments in your facility and that kind of thing. So Ford has very much come off of that, taken a new tact. All four dealers will have it, but yeah, the product line of EVs, which has been now in the works now for at least 5 years, if not more, for many of these OEMs, is very much out there. They're on the lots, but they're not selling, and they need more subsidy apparently to do so.
We reported on the Alliance of Automotive Innovation's request to the Department of Justice to roll back state franchise protections, as you've seen on CBT News and also Automotive News. Can you tell us more about that and its potential impact on dealerships and blue sky values? Because it would seem to me something like that would really threaten the franchise system. I've spoken to a number of experts, including Len Belavia, who knows something about something like this. And he said, well,
Sure.
It sounds good, but it's really based on the states, not so much the federal government. But who knows? You know, it's something that I think took everybody by surprise when they did this. So what's your take on that?
It's a really big story, and ultimately it may come to nothing, but it's a
Yeah.
really, really big story. So I guess let's just start with acknowledging that the franchise dealer body, this has been a very, very robust business model for a long
Oh, yeah,
time,
for sure.
and barring new information, I think we can sort of rest on that. But
Right.
in a very surprising move, the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, which represents all of the major OEMs, has filed a petition with the DOJ, and it's a full assault on the traditional franchise dealer body that we've all come to know over the last many generations. And so, a real surprise. It's been characterized by some in the press as a holy war now
Yeah.
between the dealers and
That's
NADA and the OEMs.
I think Don made that claim from Virginia Auto Dealers Association.
Yep,
So
that's exactly right. So it's a really big development that if it were to gain traction within the DOJ and within the Trump administration, and these are all big ifs,
Yeah.
and suddenly if the OEMs had the ability to kind of put in new retailers when they wanted them, to have perhaps more control over buy sells, take away the restrictions, their ability to work directly with consumers, for example. Yeah, I mean, talk about a watershed
Yeah.
sort of change in the regulatory environment. That would be it. So
Yeah.
really, it's a story that we all are going to really pay attention to, just to see exactly how that plays out. It certainly caught, I think, all of us by surprise in the industry.
Yes, there's no question about it. Well, much continued success to you and your team. It sounds like you're knocking the cover off the ball and having a great year so far. So congratulations to you on that. So Ryan Kerrigan, Managing Director at Kerrigan Advisors. It is always great having you into the show because I know there's so many dealers and GMs and dealer principals and OEM executives that get so much out of your take on the current state of M&A out there. So thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.